And the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader said, Mr. President, you can count on us. We'll hide this in the budget and we'll go forward. And the Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee said the same thing. And it came to the Chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, a senator named Kenneth D. McKellar from Tennessee, and he said, Mr. President, the future of civilization depends upon the success of this project. Where in Tennessee are we going to build it? Anyway, that gaseous diffusion plant, powered by electricity from TVA, was enormous in size, and in that era used more electricity than the entire state of Texas. So the idea that some developing country could replicate that was absurd. Now they use centrifuges, and they're small, and they can be buried, they can be hidden, they can be kept from the satellite photography. So for the 8 years I worked in the White House, every single nuclear weapons proliferation problem we had to deal with was connected to a nuclear reactor program. That is how North Korea got nuclear weapons. That is how Iran is trying to get nuclear weapons. It is the principal way nuclear proliferation has proceeded. So if we decided to make nuclear power the silver bullet and spread tens of thousands of these reactors all over the surface of the earth, we would create an infinitely more dangerous world. And the people who deal with national security understand this fully. That's why they're hell-bent for leather, to prevent the ongoing program in Iran and in North Korea. So we have to be realistic about this. Now, I'm moving on because I want to shift gears to the next section of the book. Often, I will hear from a scientist or a technologist who says, we need a technology that can take CO2 out of the atmosphere, can scavenge it, not just concentrate on reducing what goes in, but pull it back out. So they're hard at work on that. Actually, we have such a technology. It's called a tree. And when you take that technology to scale, it's called a forest. And of course, as you know, the role of forests in cleaning the air and in pulling CO2 back out of the atmosphere is incredibly important. But as you also know, one of the principal parts of our present challenge is that 15 to 18% of the CO2 that's being put up there is coming from burning forests every year. A football field worth is disappearing every second. Every second. And part of the global effort to solve this crisis has to involve protecting forests and replanting forests and planting new trees. And some countries are doing better than others. China, in each of the last several years, has planted 2.5 times more trees than the entire rest of the world put together. And the United Nations is driving a program that's planted several billion trees already, but we need to do much more, both in planting and, far more importantly, in protecting the forest, not least because they are also the repositories of biodiversity, and we face an extinction crisis that is also connected to this environmental crisis. So protecting forests is incredibly important. Now, the next chapter covers a subject not nearly as well known. When I was a boy, I spent my summers on our family farm in Tennessee, and I learned from my dad a lot of things, but one of them was how to recognize the richest, best soil. Those of you who've been on farms or around agriculture, what does the best soil look like? It's black and moist. Why is it black? That's the carbon. That's the carbon. 58% of the key growing layer is pure organic carbon. And yet industrial agriculture and factory farming have depleted the carbon from the soil and made the soil less productive. And here again, as with so many parts of the solution, as with so many of the solutions to the climate crisis, when we do the right thing, it solves multiple problems simultaneously. There are improved agricultural techniques, Biochar is an exciting new technology discussed in detail in this book. The use of rhizobium bacteria, mycorrhizal fungi, and these are $10 words, but the agricultural specialists are really excited about this stuff because it works incredibly well. These advanced techniques can dramatically increase the storage of carbon in the soil and make the soils more fertile, increase income to farmers while simultaneously removing CO2 from the atmosphere. It does require a shift away from the factory farming and industrial agriculture techniques, but again, we need to do that anyway. Because those agricultural techniques have been disastrous in many ways. They interrupt the synergy between animals and plants, and manure, instead of being a fertilizer, is now a toxic waste and a nuisance. The diet implications are quite significant. Eating less meat is part of the answer to this as well. I'm not a vegetarian, but I eat less meat now, and it's healthy, and it's also part of an intelligent way to respond to the climate crisis. But here's the key point. There is between 3 and 4.5 times as much carbon stored in the topsoil of the earth than all the trees and vegetation put together. And this element of the crisis has been largely ignored for reasons that are discussed in the book, but it is now an exciting new frontier for new solutions to this crisis. Now, I'm only going to spend a brief word on the next chapter, which is population, another living system, because many people think that population is somehow a taboo in the discussion of the climate crisis. It's not really, but it is not focused on with the same constant fervor, partly because population is a success story unfolding in slow motion. And people are sometimes surprised to hear that, because after all, the population explosion, as it used to be called, is one of the principal causes of the climate crisis. After all, we have quadrupled human population in less than 100 years, and our collective footprint on the earth is now much larger and deeper than it was in the past. It is our consumption of natural resources, as a consequence, our waste streams, everything. It is a major cause. But where the discussion of solutions is concerned, we should take heart from the fact that it is an emerging success story, because the social scientists have come to understand very clearly over the last couple of decades exactly what causes an historic shift from large populations to stabilized populations, from one equilibrium pattern to another. The first pattern is characterized by high death rates and high birth rates and large families, and the second equilibrium pattern is characterized by smaller families with lower birth rates and lower death rates. Just to take this audience as an example, I'll ask you for a show of hands, if you don't mind. How many of you, my grandparents were each in families with 6 siblings. How many of you have grandparents or great-grandparents, because many of you are a lot younger than me, how many of you have grandparents or great-grandparents that had 6 or more siblings? Okay, thank you. How many of you have 6 or more kids? Congratulations, ma'am. Truly. But that's the demographic transition right here in this room. And it has taken place throughout the United States, throughout Western Europe, throughout Japan, and here's the good news that many are not aware of. That transition is now occurring in virtually every nation in the world, throughout the developing world, as well as the wealthier countries.